Today, we're breaking down a topic that's been all over the news and all over our clinics lately. The FDA removing the black box warning on hormone replacement therapy. Now, a lot of people are hearing this headline and thinking, great, HRT is totally safe now. Others are worried. It means women were maybe misled for decades. And honestly, the truth is a lot more complicated than either extreme.
Yeah, this change has created a lot of confusion and a lot of excitement and a lot of concern. And when something gets this much attention, patients start getting mixed messages from every direction. Social media, wellness clinics, functional practitioners, and even other physicians who weren't trained on this in residency. So today, we're going to walk through what the actual black box warning means, why it was put there, and why it was removed, what the data really says, and where the nuance actually lives.
So recently, the FDA removed a black box warning for the use of hormone replacement therapy in postmenopausal women. And to me, removing that warning may indicate that there is somewhat new evidence to suggest that it is okay universally to use this in women who are suffering from menopausal symptoms. What are your thoughts, Dr. Seth?
So I mean that's all the rage right now is the conversation about the black box warning, and it seems like there is a veil unlifted so that hormone replacement therapy can be used in without as much scrutiny. I think that's I think how we can address it.
Yeah,
people have to remember what the black box warning is. Black box warning on a medication is a warning. It is not a contraindication.
Safety proof.
Yeah, it is not. Yeah, exactly. So what I find really interesting about a black box warning is it's almost like that black box warning on a cigarette packet, right? Like people are still doing it, but it's like, this will cause you cancer, right? And so there's a black box warning on antipsychotic medications, right? And it's just like all cause death, right? But like those medications are prescribed extensively throughout the public, right? They're even advertised on the television. So we have to take this removal of HRT black box with a grain of salt. That's the first thing. There is a lot of discussion about how this is an opportunity for women to shine and this and that, and that's not what this is.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be a lot of nuance in this conversation.
Well, you recently stumbled across some interesting and maybe some controversial information. Do you care to share that?
Yes. So, we don't want to be political, okay? There's not a political statement. All right. So the head of the FDA happens to be, I want to make sure I'm getting this exactly right.
Yeah, take your time.
He happens to be the CEO, a previous CEO of a company called Sesame, which was a weight loss company that did telehealth that sold compound weight loss drugs in that form. So, that's not...
And estrogen, correct?
No.
And hormone?
Sesame just did weight loss.
Okay.
But telehealth weight loss, okay? And he was an executive at that facility. His new health director for the Advanced Research Projects Agency, part of the FDA, is Dr. Alicia Jackson, a PhD, who is now and was prior the CEO of a company called EverNow, which is a menopause telemedicine company. Okay? So I'm not inferring any suggestion, but one could make a link that they are more in the suggestive of that this is a benefit rather than there's concerns, right? And so then there was a statement that came out from the FDA, and I'm going to read you the statement. So the statement said, let's see here. So there was initially an editorial from in JAMA, which which Dr. Macri, or not Dr. Yeah, Dr. Macri of the FDA quoted, women may also reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease by 50%, Alzheimer's disease by 35%, and bone fractures by 50 to 60%. Though the timing of starting timing of HRT and duration of use are decisions made between the prescriber and the individual patient, the FDA's label recommendation will be to start HRT within 10 years of menopause onset or before 60 years of age for systemic HRT. So the reason why I have some concerns about this is it sounds like it's amazing. And anytime anybody says that there is like all this benefit, it sounds like a wonder drug. And that's a concern I have, because the statements that they're saying, the 50% Alzheimer's disease, the reduction, 50% reduction of cardiovascular disease, the 35% reduction of Alzheimer's disease, and the bone fracture reduction of 50 to 60%, that's hyperbole. And that's
not been proven.
And it's not good science. It's not good research. Like they cherry picked, for example, this Alzheimer's disease one. They found it from like a study with 9,000 women in a retirement community.
Mm-hmm.
And then they took like death certificates of patients, and they said, do you have Alzheimer's? Yes. Did you take hormone estrogen and not progesterone, just estrogen only? And if they did, or if they did not, then they said that was a reduction in it. Well, you don't prove anything. That it just says that that these people happen to die, and they happen to be on these medications or not be on these medications. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is also taken in the 1980s when, smoking happened to be like much more prominent.
Sure.
Right? So those sort of things were there.
Yeah.
And diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease was not as prevalent as it is now. So there's a ton of nuance in like understanding these things. And to confer that HRT reduces Alzheimer's by 35% from this statement, that's more... Right. That's hyperbole. That's salesmanship.
Right.
And if you're selling me something, then I'm going to go and say, well, who are you selling it to?
Yeah.
And why are you selling it?
This needs to be very factual. I mean, theoretically, I think we've always learned that there are benefits, but has this truly been proven, and by how much?
Right.
Right. So, I think it's interesting to look in the history why there was a black box warning to begin with, because of the Women's Health Initiative. And while it may come across as being a flawed study, I think it certainly raised the question, is this truly good long-term for women? And so...
So let's talk about the Women's Health Study. So it was a study, it was gone over... I want to say over like 18 years. It had thousands.
Started in the early 90s, I think, right?
It had, and I think it ended, I could be using the number wrong. I know it ended in like 1998, and then the study extrapolated data over years. Mm-hmm. And it was a prospective study.
And I think there was a misconception that it was only looking at postmenopausal women.
Right. So I think what ended up happening was it just took a humongous cohort of patients. Mm-hmm. And like and I'm not very knowledgeable about the exact data about that, but I want to say that there was broad information on women and their age groups. So from what we can understand about the Women's Health Initiative and how the black box warning came about is from these large data sets, they were able to confer that if you took hormone replacement therapy at that time, mm-hmm. then there was an increased risk of cardiovascular disease by a lot, stroke by a lot, cancer by a lot. And so they said, black box warning.
Over an extended period of time.
Exactly. Right. And so that there wasn't a specific nuance in aging. In like there was younger age groups. It was just that it seems to be a bad thing. And then over time, with some more nuance of understanding, even of the studies from the Women's Health Initiative, they were able to extrapolate differences in age groups. And I think that's where today's conversation has changed.
And do you think it was only looking at one specific type of hormone replacement therapy, specifically Premarin?
Premarin, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Do you know much about Premarin?
So Premarin, if you break down the word, it's extrapolated from conjugated equine estrogen. So horses, right? So pregnant mares, they took estrogen from a pregnant horse. Horses make 47 estrogens. Females make 3 estrogens, right? And we're giving that. And I guess the theory was that that could be in itself dangerous. It certainly helped a lot of women who were having and struggling with menopausal symptoms, but using that type of estrogen may have increased the risk.
Right.
But they took that as maybe all estrogens, perhaps. And I think, and that's maybe where the discussion is are all estrogens risky? Are there different types of estrogens? Is the route that which you're giving those estrogens carry risk or more of a benefit?
Yeah.
I think it's still to be determined,
Yep,
right?
exactly. So and that's where I think we've talked about in like the wellness world.
Mm-hmm.
There's large populations of people who are prescribing these medications.
Yeah.
And to confer that stuff like diagnosis or treatments from like assumptions, you can't make statements from it. And that's where all this like problems are happening from the current public, losing a little bit of trust in the current game.
And it can be very confusing because now you have, in the functional medicine world where there are studies that suggest, estrogen certainly alone has many benefits and that there's not a risk for breast cancer. But the minute you start adding synthetic progesterone, which is called progestin, that there may carry a higher risk.
Yeah.
But then you think about the risk of uterine cancer.
Right. So for the general public, estrogen alone supposedly has a 20 to 30%. I'm getting that messed up here, and that's why it's so confusing.
It is.
Estrogen alone, 20 to 30% increased risk of breast cancer. Estrogen plus progesterone, no or maybe a little bit of reduction risk in breast cancer. Then you flip it to uterine, and it's flipped around.
Right.
Estrogen alone has a decreased risk of uterine cancer, and estrogen plus progesterone has an increased risk of cancer.
Yeah, I don't think you can say that twice. Right?
I'm confused myself. I have to look at it. I'm like, I've written it down, and I'm still confused, and that's why it's so challenging.
Yeah.
And why no one solution is the answer to this. So I think where I've come to understand quite a bit of this is if you test your levels for asymptomatic, if you're asymptomatic and somebody says you should test your levels, I think that's not a smart idea.
Right.
If you have symptoms, these could be perimenopausal symptoms, they could be premenopausal symptoms, then that is reasonable to have a conversation about what the next step is. Yeah. But if you're feeling awesome and they're like, just check your levels for safety, there's no role in that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you say to the patient that, or even some functional medicine doctors out there that says there is a difference between progesterone and micronized progesterone? Is there? To me, I feel like they're relatively the same.
Yeah.
I know micronized meaning it may be absorbed a little bit better, but is there truly a difference?
I think it's just salesmanship. I think people are selling products and they're selling it in different
formulations. You typically only get micronized progesterone in a compounding pharmacy.
That's
correct?
Right. Yeah.
So
it really, anytime somebody is selling you a product and they're saying this is better, my argument is where's the data? And if there's strong data, well, I promise you, then I will be the one person behind it. But
do you think there is a safety benefit in using a topical hormone, specifically estrogen and progesterone, as opposed to an oral estrogen and progesterone?
Well, you have to think about it the way the medication is absorbed. If you take it in oral, the dosing, the absorption is going to be higher. The topical, the absorption is going to be less. Therefore, the effect of that medication is going to be less, but the side effect will also be less.
Yeah.
Right. So it really depends on the person. Like if they have very mild symptoms, like vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes and stuff like that, and they have mild symptoms, maybe a topical could be an option. It just really depends.
There were some studies that I had read, and I have to look back to really see how they were done and how well they were done. But if you have a postmenopausal female who is, let's say, over 60, who is still struggling with symptoms because of the cardiovascular risk, it would be okay to give them more of a topical estrogen and or a patch, because I guess how that oral estrogen is metabolized, those metabolites may increase your risk for having a heart attack and a stroke. So I think it's still to be determined in many aspects. So.
I think what we can say from the Women's Health Initiative information, from the KEEPS data, from the data studies, is if you're over the age of 65, it's probably not a safe thing to do.
Right.
If you're postmenopausal or you're over the age of 65, the risk of clots, stroke, supposedly some cognitive issues, the risks are there. And it's probably not a safe thing to do.
So let's say you have a 65-year-old female that comes to your clinic, and she, for years, has struggled with menopausal symptoms.
Right.
And she has been on hormone replacement therapy and has been thriving. Do you, and you are now her doctor, do you take away those hormones?
I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea. I have not been approached by this situation.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that, like, I don't know if I feel safe administering, especially like some of the pellet therapy options. I don't think I would do pellet therapy. You know, there's
and let's say she is on oral estrogen and an oral progesterone.
And there's a huge risk with that. Like there's DVTs, for example, stroke, for example, and cardiovascular disease like heart attacks. Like there is some risk with it, especially over the age of 65. So I think
so if you make the decision to take her off of them, and a week later she calls you and says, "I am in dire straits. The hot flashes are back. I'm more irritable. I'm not sleeping well. This is truly going to affect me and my marriage."
Yeah.
What do you do, Dr. Seth?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I would call you. Yeah. Like, what do I do?
I hear this a lot, and I'm one that truly feels that there is a benefit. Obviously my obligation is to first do no harm and take the information that we have. There's evidence that say that there's benefits, and there's maybe some evidence that say there's some risks. So what do you do? I think you really have to look at each individual and their risk factors and really give them that informed consent.
Yeah.
And in a way, I want them to have a good quality of life as well. And if this means that taking away their hormones are not going to give them a quality of life, then...
I mean, the other option is that you could think about like different routes.
Right.
Like the oral estrogen is going to be much more concentrated, higher potency form. So
I would definitely consider putting her on a patch or even a pellet just to remove maybe that excessive amount and those reduce that metabolite risk.
So isn't the pellet going to be...
You're going to bypass the gut.
Right, but there's going to be a higher dose of...
Well, it's time released, so it's slowly released over a certain time period.
But that also affects on the person too. Like if the person is highly active, then that time release is going to increase even more. So.
Correct.
So
I think you have to take a lot into consideration.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously there are some other alternatives that I think it's important to educate women about, that, the SSRIs to help control menopausal symptoms. There are some other medications, the neurokinin antagonists, for example, which I do prescribe and have had significant results with that, especially for women who just are complaining of those hot flashes and night sweats. Veozah, for example, is outstanding and is a very clean drug at the end of the day. So, but I think in general, I feel like there are some good benefits. Have I seen, for women who've been on HRT for a while, do I really see in a DEXA scan that their bones have significantly improved? I haven't.
Right.
No. I have seen women who struggle with insomnia, and if a lot of even perimenopausal women who cannot sleep, if you give them oral micronized progesterone alone at night, they will sleep better.
Yeah.
They
I do.
really will.
See,
clinically. I see that.
Yeah, we do. I do see some of that, like where patients are describing a big improvement in their symptoms is their sleep.
Yeah.
And that's obviously without a history of sleep apnea or et cetera.
Right.
Which is obviously a really important feature of it. I guess like I have a difficult time wrapping my head around the fact that, the data still strongly suggests against treatment of, symptoms, postmenopausal symptoms with HRT. I guess the question is, those like situations, I was telling you about that experience that I had where I had to go for one of these estrogen HRT training courses. And at the time, like they had this like course where like is a clinic where you had to practice on it, and they had like tons of patients there, and I mean tons of patients. And looking back and seeing these patients in there, they were all walks of life, multiple different ages. There was men and women in the group and everything, and majority of women were over the age of 65.
Wow.
And I would argue, I don't think they knew the risk factor.
Yeah.
And that's where it bothers me.
Yeah.
That where there is not appropriate science. The speakers of the science are poor at best. And there's a financial benefit to it.
Right.
And so that's where like, yeah, people can say about concierge medicine and they can question financial questions, but I think that's where we have to be different from the grifters of the world.
Sure.
Where we say, yeah, okay, fine, we are a business in terms, but we still took an oath. And like you said, first do no harm. So managing their symptoms is really important, but informing them about the risks and benefits is equal.
It's important.
And
again, I think it's always seeing where they're at in their season of life as well. I mean, I always have that conversation in women who either they're new to me, new to the practice, and they come in already being on HRT. If they are a certain age, I am always talking to them about, do we consider holding this and just going on a drug holiday and seeing how you do? A lot of women, when you do that, they say, I feel fine. Then you should not have been on HRT, right? So, and then on the flip side, I've seen women who have taken them off and they are struggling a little bit. So recently I have a postmenopausal female who, it was an interesting story. She was on HRT and doing very well. And she's very healthy. And all of a sudden she, sustained an injury on a bike. She was in Amsterdam, ended up having a 10-hour flight back to the States, and then gets back to Las Vegas and wakes up and her whole right side is numb and she cannot form sentences. So we obviously think stroke, right? So rush her to the ER. There's really no evidence of a stroke. They hospitalize her, they do the cardiac workup, and basically say it was all due to the HRT. And so, and thankfully she has no residual neuro deficits. So, and I'm thinking, well, she had a fall. She had stasis, 10-hour plane ride. So 2 out of the 3 of the Virchow's triads. So could she also have an underlying coagulopathy? And they just said, yeah, it's her HRT. Well, me being somewhat of a proponent of HRT, I said, well, let's do a coagulopathy workup. Well, she has factor V Leiden. And no history of miscarriages, nothing. So at the end of the day, this was something that's may have been the biggest culprit, and was it just a perfect storm?
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah. But she came in and asks the question because she definitely notices being off of the hormone replacement therapy.
Now, like, so going back and like, so the factor V Leiden, and what's that's for people who do not know, if you're a homozygous factor V Leiden, you have an increased risk of coagulability. If you're quote unquote heterozygous, which a lot of people are, it doesn't necessarily mean they're really exactly at risk. But then the question is, well, if you add estrogen therapy or progesterone therapy, if you put smoke, does that increase your risk? Honestly, probably, maybe. We don't know. 100% sure. Would you take that risk? I don't know. So you're 100% right. Yeah. Is it the medication? Is it the genetic factor? And the other thing is, in that story, did she actually have a stroke? Well, the MRI confirmed that it was not.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So then the coagulopathy and the HRT wasn't the issue. Then the other question is like, well, what caused her to have this paralysis with difficulty speaking?
And I guess, was there potentially from the fall, was there a small clot that traveled up? Does she have an opening in her heart that it traveled and went to the brain? Who knows? But there was no evidence of it.
Yeah,
thankfully. So
so they diagnosed her with a TIA.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they called it a TIA. They said it was potentially from a hypercoagulable state, which they stated was from the HRT.
Right.
You were able to find that she had factor V Leiden.
Right.
So then what did you do with...
Sent her to hematology, and we actually put her on Xarelto.
Okay.
And got the hematologist's opinion. They are continuing Xarelto.
Oh.
But again, the question was, can I go back on estrogen?
Yeah.
In a brief second, my mind said, well, she's already protected. She's got a blood thinner. What do you do?
That's a brutal question. That is such a brutal question, because I know what I like. And when Andreas and I were talking about like AI doing board exam questions, this is not on the board. I'll tell you what the board exam question is. The response is remove Xarelto, remove this, and remove the HRT. But like, there's the human element in that part.
Well, and I also look back at our physiology. So again, females make 3 estrogens: estriol, estradiol, and estrone. In my mind, I'm thinking, if estrogen is truly, truly bad in a pregnant female, when estriol levels are significant, why wouldn't every pregnant female get breast cancer?
I mean, I imagine it's the levels, the concentrated level.
And again, estriol is different than estradiol. Estradiol is truly much more of a potent estrogen, where I've read estriol is definitely more protective. But it certainly brings up a good discussion. Right?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to be honest with you, those kind of questions, like, you need to do a deep dive in reading and.
And I think we as physicians definitely need to be prepared for these topics that come up, because certainly now with this information in the news, they're going to be out there.
Yeah.
And I think I need to be better prepared, and certainly you, because these patients will come to you for guidance.
So I did a lecture regarding these for our medical residents for internal medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And internal medicine, like, we had this like funny thing in internal medicine where if a patient comes with any sort of obstetrics problem in the hospital, you just consult OB, right? And it's historically very easy for us to just be like, oh, it's not in our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And so when I gave the lecture, I I described it to them as, you don't understand what's coming down the pipeline. Like, this is what majority of your patients are going to talk to you about. If they're female, between the ages of 40 and 60, this is the conversations they want to know.
Well, and I think because of this black box warning for several years, there's been a generation of physicians that did not get educated on this topic, right? And, it certainly raises the question, has it hindered a whole generation of women? Who knows? But I think we need to do a better job of talking about this, and maybe more studies need to happen to better educate us, because I do feel bad for a lot of these female patients who struggle and maybe not always having the best solutions for them.
So I have like 3 or 4 like big summary points that I kind of like thought of. Number 1, the removal of the black box warning was a good idea, and it refers to exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
There is an absolute generation of patients and doctors who have ignored women's health pre and perimenopausal symptoms. Right? It's just like, tough, deal with it. And like, I remember like when my mom went through it, I remember like how miserable she was through that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for us as physicians to be like, too bad, just suck it up. That kind of, that
Which
process was
wrong.
Yeah, it was an issue. The other thing that I can determine from this, like, from my understanding of this, is the one thing about the Women's Health Initiative that I did not like is how they just jumbled in like giant cohorts of women and just said, for everybody, this is the this is the problem.
Right.
That you cannot take this medication. But I'm like 40 years old. Too bad.
Right.
It's out of your wheelhouse.
Right.
It's the equivalent of like thalidomide for women, right? So there's that nuance. And then the third thing that I felt was there needs way more robust studies.
Right.
Okay, like there are a lot of great questions out there and a lot of people asking for treatment. Just like you said,
Mm-hmm.
well, what if I'm 65 years old and I've been on treatment for 10 years on this stuff? What am I going to do now?
Right.
Does that mean we just shut everything off?
Right.
Because that's a great point. I not only will I lose trust in that patient will go find another doctor.
They will.
Right.
And if patients are really struggling, and they will eventually find someone who will do it.
And that's where the danger of the grifters come in.
Right.
Because they're not going to think about the stroke risk or the PE.
No.
They're going to be like, here's your elixir.
Right.
And
that's why I think in our positions and what we do, we have the time to really talk through this. And I think I will always be there for patients like you will. I will always have a plan B for them, but I want them to be educated at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Interesting topic.
I'm terrified of the future now. I spent this whole morning like reading and I was reading the data and I was reading the study as I was like, I need more information. Yeah. And there's so much information out there, but it's not really good data.
Yeah.
Like to confer that for the FDA to confer that Alzheimer's reduces the risk by 35% from like some survey from 9,000 old people in California, and to say this is proof. I mean, wow, is this the day and age we're living in? People were saying that like we're living in this age of like glorious education, yet this is the data that we're pulling up. Damn.
Well, regardless, and my final thought on this is if you have a patient that's on HRT, just make sure you are getting their mammograms once a year. Make sure you're doing their screening. If they're postmenopausal and they have vaginal bleeding, that's cancer until proven otherwise.
100%.
Make sure you're doing imaging and working up as much as you can and really having consistent follow-up with these patients.
And I think the last thing I would add to it is if you're considering treatment for pre or perimenopausal symptoms, speak to somebody who you feel is qualified to do it, who is board certified, who understands the nuance of it, because I think there's so much more information out there,
right? And
this is where you need really great advice.
HRT is one of those topics where the headlines almost never matches the science. And when you're dealing with real women who are struggling with sleep, hot flashes, mood changes, or quality of life issues, you can't reduce this just to sound bites.
Exactly. There are benefits. There are risks. And the responsible answer is almost always, it depends. It depends on age, symptoms, medical history, route of administration, family risk, timing, and the season of life someone is in. If today's episode helped clear things up for you, hit subscribe, leave us a review, share it with someone who's confused about this topic. And as always, shout it out from the rooftops.
And if you're in Tampa or Las Vegas and you want to take care of yourself and really focus on care that's evidence-based, honest, and actually designed around you, we'd love to take care of you. In Tampa, visit Seth Premier Medical. And in Las Vegas, visit my team at Parker Medical. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on another episode of Out of Network.